You may not have thought about this very much, but doors are really useful things. They allow entry into what is inside, and they keep whatever is outside, providing security. We should be really thankful for doors. It's only when you don't have a door or the door isn't working that you realise just how useful the door is. Perhaps the most famous of Gary Larson's many Far Side cartoons is the Midvale School for the Gifted cartoon. There is a young child seeking to enter into the Midvale School for the Gifted. It very clearly has the words "pull" written on the door, and this small gifted child is pressing as hard as he can to try and go through the door. Any of you who've tried to go into Hadley's have probably had the same experience, because the door opens the wrong way. You always want to walk through the door, but you have to pull the door. When I'm leading services at the 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. service, some people have asked me, why was I laughing? It's because there's probably somebody at the outside of the door doing this, trying to get the door opener to work. And sometimes it's Jan who has to go through and wave at the door. A couple of weeks ago, I was preparing for the Book of Common Prayer service on a Thursday morning, wondering what I was going to use as my illustration for the problem with doors, and I slammed the vestry door shut, as you have to do to make it shut, and the handle came off, leading me to think I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to get back in. I was at least grateful to God for the helpful sermon illustration. Jesus says in John chapter 10, I am the door. And he is a door that we should be thankful for. We should be thankful that it's an open door, but it is a door with which many people struggle. If we're thinking about Jesus being I am the door or I am the gate, it's worth asking, well, what's behind the door? Why go through this door? What is it that is there? And Jesus tells us what is there in verse 9 of John chapter 10. If you come through this door, you will be saved. Salvation is what's on the other side of the door. That's a pretty good thing to go through to get into. It's that promise that we saw back in John chapter 3, that God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. It's that promise of the life that God promised for us. And this is expanded in verse 10 when Jesus says, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Life in all its fullness waits on the other side of this door. The kind of life that is usually promised to you in banking adverts. The kind of life that's social media influencers trying to indicate that that's the life they're having, regardless of what their life may actually be like. The good life, the abundant life. It's on the other side of this door. It's the kind of life that's pictured in Psalm 23, which from a sheep's perspective is abundant green grass, but from a human perspective is overflowing cups and tables which are full. It's that kind of satisfying life which is on the other side of the door. The life for which we were made and which Jesus offers us now and eternally into the future is on the other side of the door. Salvation, life to the full, it's well worth going through, and we should want to go through. But we do need to understand that Jesus is making here a claim which many people struggle. He is saying he is the only door. The only way to get to that life to the full is through him. In previous weeks, we've looked at Jesus' other I am statements. He is the light of the world. He is the bread of life. The only way to truly see that light is to go through this door. The only way to truly get that bread is to go through this door. You have to come out of the darkness, you have to come out of the wilderness and go through the door, which is Jesus. Now we need to note this is not just something that is here in John chapter 10. We find it elsewhere in the New Testament. Of course, it is built into John 3:16. The only way to get the eternal life that's there in John 3:16 is to believe in Jesus. In Acts chapter 4, Peter says, "There is salvation in no one else. There is no other name under heaven given among mortals by which we may be saved." Romans 10:9, Paul says, "If you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." How do you get saved? Through Jesus. What Christianity offers is found only and nowhere else but in Jesus. Now in John chapter 10, there is absolutely no way of sidestepping this claim of Jesus, for he compares himself with others. Any other claimants, he says they are thieves and robbers who came only to steal, kill and destroy. To go through other doors ultimately is not the entrance to life, but into difficulty, pain and loss. When Jesus says, "I am the door," he is saying think very carefully about which door you go through. Because I am the only door to salvation and life to the full. If we want what Christianity offers, which I want to tell you is what God offers, and life as God intends it to be, it is to be found only in Jesus and through Jesus. Friends, this is not a popular message. Most people would recoil at the idea there is only one door. Surely there should be more culturally appropriate doors for everyone. It doesn't really matter which door you choose. There must be more doors. But I think asking whether there are more doors is the wrong question. The right question is, you only need one door if that door is open. As long as there is one open door, it doesn't matter which door, it doesn't matter. Just as long as you can go through that one, you can get to the other side. Because the image of a closed door is very powerful. You may remember the movie Sliding Doors, a Gwyneth Paltrow movie where her life splits in two between whether she got on the train because the door was shut or she didn't get on the train because the door... Hang on, I've got that round the wrong way, haven't I? She didn't get on the train because the door was shut, or she got on the door because the door was open, and then her life goes in two completely different ways, depending on whether she got on the door or got on the train or didn't get on the train. You may be able to think in your own life of moments where a door got shut, and life could no longer go that way, but it had to go that way. Many of us may be able to understand the Ziggy cartoon. Now, does anybody remember Ziggy? It was a cartoon about the 80s and 90s. It was kind of a sort of guy with a big round head who life never worked out for him. And now, this just shows when people say you can find anything on the internet, you can't, because I have spent way too long trying to find this cartoon. I've got it somewhere in my filing cabinet. But it's a cartoon of Ziggy. There is a door that says opportunity. So it's on the door. And Ziggy's looking over his shoulder with the door handle in his hand. He's gone to open the door of opportunity, and like me in the vestry, the door handles come off. The opportunity door was closed. It was shut. Shut doors stop opportunity. The wonderful news of the Christian gospel is that because we know of what we know of Jesus, we know the door is open. Further, an open door is an invitation to walk through the door. Last week, over the last weeks, we have looked at some of the things Jesus says. They're all invitational. The light is to be walked in. The bread is to be eaten. The door is to be walked through. It invites a response, and we are to enter into a relationship in and through Jesus. Jesus has previously said, "Whoever comes to me, I will not turn away." The door is open. Come on in. We need to be clear that the door is not the church. You don't come in by coming through the door of Macquarie Street or Murray Street. It's not by coming to church that's opening the door. It's not by having a particular religious experience that is going through the door. It is not by doing set spiritual exercises that you go through the door. It is by hearing Jesus' call to treat him as Lord and as risen Lord that you walk through the door. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you're on the other side of the door. And you're welcomed into salvation and life to the full. That is the main issues around the statement of Jesus saying he is the door. And it will lead directly, if you keep reading in John, into the perhaps more famous statement of Jesus where he says, "I am the good shepherd." We're going to be thinking about that in a few weeks' time at Evensong when George is going to be preaching. There's a few things happening before then. But for what we need to think about the door, those are the main things. However, there are a couple of things that I think are worth us thinking further about in relation to the door. Firstly, Jesus speaks about those who seek to get to the sheep by another way than the door. Now, it's worth remembering, of course, Jesus is the door. That would suggest that all leaders of God's people need to be thoroughly Christocentric. They need to be people who are focused on Jesus. To seek to lead God's people without a dedicated focus on who Jesus is can only lead to hurt of the sheep. We therefore need to keep an eye on our leaders that they are people who do come in through the gate which is Christ. If they do not, we should not listen to their voice. They can be disqualified either by their behaviour, they are deliberately seeking to harm the sheep, or through their teaching, which is ultimately not Christ-focused, and so loses access to abundant life. Now, you may wonder why I feel it's necessary to say these things, but sadly, it is not too hard to find church leaders who do either of those things, deliberately hurt the sheep, or are not focused on Jesus. The way to the sheep is through Jesus. Church leaders, preachers, need to be focused on Jesus and need to help you hear the voice of Jesus. Please pray that the pastors of this church will always do that. The other thing is there's another little odd thing in this passage which intrigues me. This door is a two-way door. Did you notice Jesus says, those who come in through me will come in and go out and find pasture. That's the image of abundant life. Come in and go out. Now, there's always the danger of pushing a metaphor too far and getting carried away with the imagery, which is here. But I think some people think that going through this door locks you in and away from the world. I think this imagery says that's not abundant life at all. You come in, you listen to Jesus, you go out and you keep listening to him and you live an abundant life outside the sheep pen. God's abundant life is not for us to be in the sheep pen. I'm sorry to describe the Nixon Chapel as a sheep pen. But you don't want to live here. Well, I hope you don't want to live here. We want to come in and go out, and then come in again, and then go out again, as we listen to the voice of the shepherd. It is by coming in and going out into the wider world that we live this abundant life. Now, a particular danger for the minister is that he can think that it's his job to keep everybody in the fold, to keep everybody here, that what really matters is what we do here. But that would be like the shepherd trying to train the sheep to just do stuff inside the fold, which would be ridiculous. My job is to help you be good sheep out there and live the abundant life out there. That is the life that you are called to live. Now, I've got one more point that I want to make. Now, this is going to make it interesting for the video, because I might have to edit the video. So I've got one more point I want to make, but does anybody have any questions before I make my final point? You don't have to.
How can we live that abundant life once we go through the door?
Sure. I would say that to live the Christian way, so many of you will have heard me use the language from Colossians chapter 3, that we clothe ourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness and patience, acting in forgiving love and with thankfulness, that we actually discover when we live like that, that is abundant life. And so church should be equipping us to live that life. And I can only say in my own experience that there are times that I will do that grumpily. Now you might think that's a sort of an oxymoronic statement about being compassionate, kind, humility. But I go, well, I guess I have to be compassionate, kind. But then as I try to put that into practice, I actually discover, actually this is better than sitting in the grumpiness and disappointment and stuff that I had before. So that to me is what it looks like. And of course for Jesus, ultimately, if I'm thinking forward now to some of the things he'll say later, it is to love one another as I have loved you. That ultimately, living a life of love is abundant life. That's a good question, because I can leave that on the video.
Do you think that deep down people...
Sorry, Daisy, no, it's right, it's fine. Do you think
deep down people who live without Jesus are unhappy?
That's a great question, Daisy. I'm sure there are many people who don't think they're unhappy. And it's not, I don't think it's my job to tell people actually you're unhappy. Like that would be a very strange, well, there are plenty of Christian preachers that they seem to have this fixation about I've got to make everybody feel bad so that they'll then hear the good news. But I think it's more that what Christianity offers is better than whatever they've got. So I kind of think about it, like if you're looking, if there's two of you, you're looking out over a cliff, and this way there is a sunrise, and over that way there are some lovely waves, right? And somebody's looking at the lovely waves, and you want to go, look at the sunrise. And the person goes, no, I'm looking at lovely waves. Yeah, I get it, lovely waves, but look at the sunrise. It's better.
S-O-N.
I don't know what that means, and I don't want to...
The Son of God.
Okay,
So-
yes, no, I wasn't trying to be...
No, but
No.
do you get what...
Yeah, I do now, but
yeah.
they're. But all I mean is, I don't think our job is to help people understand that actually they're desperately unhappy inside. Some people clearly are, and when you explain the gospel to them, it's the greatest news they've ever heard, and they respond with joy and wonder. But for others, it's going, actually, what this offers me is better. I don't want to say it's definitely more longer lasting. Yeah, so I hope that's an answer, and I think it's pointing out this is abundant life that we have in Christ. Your life might be okay, but this is better.
Maybe some people who like look for Jesus, maybe they're looking for purpose.
Absolutely, and the beautiful thing is He gives it to us, and that purpose is to live as He's called us to. And so, rather than it being something we have to work out from inside, It's actually being what we are created for. We don't have to create it ourselves. Yeah. Are you asking the quietest question in the world, Mary?
Yes. Why does Holman leave the door knob on?
I think you're talking about a Revelation chapter 3 painting. Is that what you're talking about? We're going to leave that for the pub, Mary, because that's a different passage. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Yeah, that's Revelation chapter 3. I'm in John chapter 10. This is called a red herring. And I will edit the snort out.
Sorry.
Actually, that'll be too hard to find. So, I think we'll leave the questions there. All I would want to say there is, in that image, Jesus is not the door. Jesus is at the door, and we are the door, and are we going to open it, or is the church going to open it? So it's a different metaphor that's been made. I want to end with one thought. We've considered the wide open door, and that Jesus is the door through to salvation and life to the full. But there is also an understanding that this door, which is Jesus, is not just an open door, it's a security door. There is an understanding here that to come through this security door will mean that you are inside and protected. Whereas outside there are thieves and bandits and wolves. The Jewish shepherd used to put the sheep inside a walled pen for the night, and then he would sleep across the empty space. He literally was the door for the sheep. And he slept there to keep the sheep safe. Throughout John 10, there is a great focus on safety, the eternal safety of those who come in by the door. Jesus is not just an open door, he's a security door. Ultimately, we can trust this door because of the one who has spoken these words, and by his demonstration through his death and resurrection. It is that event which both opens the door to God's kingdom, but also assures us that we have salvation, eternal salvation and security, and life to the full now and into the future. Friends, this is a door for which we should be extremely grateful, and it's a door I hope we have all gone through.